Hello, everybody. Welcome back on the Stretch Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list for 1024. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Just takes a couple of clicks, really helps out a ton. Come by, check out the stream every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going till about 3 or 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I try to talk as much as I can while I'm playing, explaining the gameplay, and just fielding any questions and having a conversation with the chat as well. So we do that, and then we also have tons and tons of other guides and just other content on the channel, so be sure to check all that out. Okay, so I just want to do a really quick meta overview on sort of what I think might change. Now, I am going to have a detailed patch notes review as well, so be sure to check that out. Maybe I can even link that at the beginning of this video. But how is this going to impact support? Well, I think the Moonstone Renewer buff is pretty large, so they're taking it up to... I think it's going to be reflected on the wiki right now. They're taking it up to 60 to 90 base, and then it can go up to 100% bonus instead of being 30 to 60 base. So that means it's going to be a lot stronger immediately if you rush this item than it used to be. So yeah, it goes 60 to 90, then plus 100 base. So on average, you know, around level 8 or 9 when you get this, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, we'll just call it 75 for easier math. And so it'll be 75 base scaling up to 150 versus before, I think it used to be 30 to 60, but could go up to 150% bonus. So if you were averaging somewhere around 40 when you completed it, and then you were getting 150%, then you would end up with 100. So you're getting somewhere between 100 to maybe 115 on average max heal before, and now you're getting 150 max heal. So that's a very big boost to this item. Especially before it scales all the way up. So at that, you know, first check at the, you know, immediately, and then at the 2-second mark on the next check when it goes off cooldown, it's going to be a lot more healing up front, which was one of my biggest critiques of this item, is that it just took too long to ramp up and just really wasn't that effective. There's so many grievous wounds out there as well, so it is very good. But if they have grievous wounds, which everybody's going to have that, then it could be a problem. It could be a problem. So it can be good, but just be aware there is grievous wounds out there, so just count on losing 40% of the value off of the healing on that in a lot of situations. However, it is a very big tank meta. A lot of people have figured this out. A lot of analysts called that wrong. You know, there were literally videos that were saying tanks were dead in Season 11, right? Now, they're stronger than I thought they were going to be too, but I thought they were at least going to be pretty good, especially the big ones in the jungle and the top lane. So if there are a lot of tanks going around, that means that fights are going to last longer, and that means that you're going to get more value out of the Moonstone. And they are also nerfing a lot of the burst mages, so they're nerfing almost every mage item you can think of that's mainstream. So most mages are going to be nerfed at the 1, 2, and 3 item slot. So that's dialing back the game, slowing it down, and that just means that tanks are going to be even more dominant. So ultimately, I think that bodes very well for Moonstone Renewer and the item, or the champions that might want that item. So we'll talk about that later, but that's probably the biggest support thing that's going on this patch, is not just the Renewer itself, but the fact that they are nerfing burst, and that everyone has figured out that tanks are good, and everyone's going to continue to play tanks because they didn't really nerf them that much on this patch. So the Leandries and Demonic Embrace nerfs will hurt AP supports, particularly ones that wanted Demonic Embrace. I think that item was a little overrated. Like, it's good, but if you just go Leandries into Void Staff, that's still a really good combination as well, and that adds a lot of damage. So I think that the really powerful mages like the Zyras and the Brands will still probably be okay. They'll be a little bit weaker. But some of the more off-meta AP picks like the Swains, you know, the Luxes and things like that are going to have a bit more of a problem. The ADC meta is still going to be Jhin, Samira, Miss Fortune, Ashe, and then Vayne might become a bit more popular. They did buff Phantom Dancer by a lot, and they are buffing Tear of the Goddess by quite a bit, so you might be seeing more Kaisas. Vayne's already very good. That Phantom Dancer nerf is huge, 200 extra gold for her, and a longer duration on the Phantom buff from 2 seconds to 3 seconds is a very big deal. So... and she's very good against tanks, whereas Jin's not that great against tanks. Historically, Samira's not amazing against tanks. However, those two are just so over-the-top OP anyways that people are still going to keep playing them. It's astounding that they did not nerf Jhin on this patch, but Anyways, so that means that champions that would like kind of a renewer build path, so champs that are going to get the Ardent Censer and Staff of Flowing Water, those types of champs are going to be a little bit more powerful just because I expect those types of ADCs to be a little bit stronger. The Vayne, maybe Kai'Sa, maybe Kog'Maw, stuff like that might move up a little bit on this patch. Tanks in the top and the jungle still going to be very OP, so expect slower teamfight oriented meta, so that's going to bode well for enchanters. And then burst mages are significantly weaker, which I just talked about. So the biggest winners I think on this patch, we'll talk about this as we move down into the tier list, are going to be Sona, Taric, and Yuumi. And then I think some of the biggest losers are going to be Zyra, Brand, and Swain. Now I think Zyra will still be okay. It's kind of a mixed bag because the AP items got nerfed directly, so that's going to hurt Brand and Zyra. But Leandries was the one that was nerfed the least. You only lost about 5% value on the Leandries in a lot of scenarios. And other items got hit way harder, so the Night Harvester got hit for like 25% of its damage, which, you know, Zyra and Brand could get that item, but they can still get Leandries and be fine. However, things like Fizz, Echo, Diana, some of these other burst mages are going to get hit a lot harder from the loss of Harvester. So it's like, yes, it hurts them directly a little bit, but it also hurts things that are good against them in the meta, like Fizz. So I think that's kind of a wash because, you know, like I said, they can still go Leandries and they can just do Void Staff second instead of Demonic Embrace, and that's a fine build. It's still going to put out a ton of damage. Void Staff is a lot better than people think it is, and it's a lot cheaper. It's 2,500 gold instead of 3,000 gold. And people think, oh, well, they got to have all this magic resist before Void Staff's worth it. It's not really the case. Like, I've looked before, testing with Zyra, 1 plant, 1 Q cast, and Void Staff was putting up more damage than Demonic Embrace, even against a target that had, I think I tested it at 50 magic resist with 1,500 max health. Void Staff was still putting up more. So even against squishy targets without much magic resist, it's still going to be very, very competitive, if not better, in DPS in the long run. So, and you're going to hit that power spike a lot faster. Because when you're building Demonic Embrace, you have to build like a Giant's Belt in there, which just kind of sucks. It's like, yeah, it gives you some health, but it doesn't help your DPS. So that item really doesn't come online until you complete it at 3,000 gold, versus Void Staff has some great components. It has that new little Void Crystal, which gives you some pin in the middle, and it's just a much better build path and completes at 2,500. So I'm not even sure if it's worse to have, like, that Demonic got nerfed. It might convince people to actually buy a stronger item in Void Staff. So anyways, I think those champs will still be okay, but they might step down just a little bit. And a lot of that is not necessarily just because of the AP item nerfs, but because the enchanters are going to be better with Moonstone, and that tanks in general, like Zyra and Brand, have some game against tanks because Leandries does do burn damage and things like that over time, but the enchanters are really going to be a lot better in a tank type of meta than the AP champs are. Okay. Let's go ahead and go in here. Okay, so Rakan back up to number 1. I think this shouldn't be a shock to a lot of people on the channel. Now, his overall win rate is not stellar, but I think there are a lot of things, as usual, that people overlook on Rakan. A huge part of why his win rate is so low is that people are getting the wrong item on him. So many people, even like challengers, are getting Shirelias all the time. And of course, challengers are very good players. They're very smart players, but I think everyone's just so used to Shirelias being strong previously on Rakan that they just automatically get this and don't even think about other options. Low-key, the best one, now it's getting nerfed this patch, was Dark Harvester, or Night Harvester, and I was using this a lot beforehand just because it had too much damage and too many stats, and it was very good on Rakan. But even in more mainstream items, Mandate has almost a 2% higher win rate. It's very good. It puts up a lot more consistent damage than Shirelias does, has way better base stats than Shirelias does. So a big part of it is too many people are getting baited by the Shirelias item, and too many people are also getting baited by Zeke's, I think. I mean, I guess Staff of Flowing Water is of similar power level, but a lot of people are getting Zeke's just because, once again, they're used to the old school build, which is okay on him, but Staff of Flowing Water is way better as far as teamfight contributions. So I think a lot of people were just itemizing him incorrectly and perhaps just not maximizing his strengths. So he's just extremely versatile. I talk about this all the time on the channel. There's really not, it's going to be very rare for a meta to exist where Rakan is not going to be able to find some place in that meta if you're proficient on him, because he has really good engage, some of the best engage with the game. with his R plus his W. But what makes him unique from something like a Leona or a Nautilus, a couple of things. First of all, he can go in and get out in the same motion. So you can go in with your R plus W and then get back out with your E. That is nice when teams may not necessarily follow up immediately. So it has kind of that safeguard, that noob safeguard, just in case, you know, you're operating in an environment where people just don't want to follow up or they're not ready for it or whatever. Then also that means that you don't have to itemize for as much tankiness, because if you're being nimble enough, if you're timing, if you're spacing correctly and timing your engages correctly, then you should be able to get out before you get hit by all sorts of random AoE or you get chain CC'd or something like that. You should be able to move around that in most situations. And there are some really bad matchups that are obscure, like Veigar and Poppy and things like that. But by and large, you should be able to maneuver around the fight and be nimble enough to where you don't have to itemize damage, which means you can itemize better stuff for your team. And that's the second part where it comes in, is he can get these huge team fight enchanter type of items and still be a great engage, which is extremely rare. Really only he and like maybe Bard and maybe Thresh can get away with getting team fight enchanter items, because they don't have to fully commit and take a beating, so they don't have to buy as many tank items. So, you know, Rakan has that sort of luxury of going something like Imperial Mandate into Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer and not getting completely blasted for that, because you should be able to position well enough where you don't get blown up in a lot of situations. So he just has much more versatile itemization and just really, really good scaling. His shield is also fantastic. It's got a 1.6 AP ratio, and its base, I think, is 280. It's 140 plus 140 on the shield. So just really, really good interactions, great scaling. May not be quite as high as something like Lulu, Sona, or Janna, just in terms of raw stats in team fights, but it's pretty close. And the fact that he has an engage on top of that, and that it's really hard for people to assassinate him because he is so mobile. So he has a lot more resilience against things like Zed or Talon or Akali than something like a Sona or a Lulu is going to have, right? And he can itemize tanky stuff if you need to, right? You can get Mercury Treads, you can get Zeeks if you need to. There's a lot of different flexibility that you have in your build, so that's why I think Rakan's number one. I mean, obviously I'm a little biased because I play him a ton, and I think I'm, you know, pretty good on him for my ELO bracket, you know, for kind of the low diamond ELO bracket, but anyways, I think he's really well positioned in this meta overall. And then Leona is probably one of the more obvious ones that you do see and that everyone does recognize is still really strong. Once again, kind of shocked this champion has not been nerfed again because she was so massive in pro. I think they're just letting the items shake out a little bit before they, you know, blow the whistle on that. But she's got a 53.5% win rate, 13% pick rate, so she is very strong. And if you'll notice, a lot of the other tanks really aren't doing so well. Leona's kind of crowding everyone else out. They're not doing terribly, like Alistar's at 52%, Nautilus is at 51.5%, so it's not terrible, but it's definitely not like a hard tank meta either. It's pretty good representation from enchanters, tanks, and AP if you're playing the right champs, right? So like Brand and Zyra are like 52% plus, and then you've got, you know, Nami and Janna are up there, then you've got Leona's up there in terms of win rates. But the name of the game with Leona is just really low cooldowns. So she's super tanky early on with her W. It's very hard to do trades with her when she has bone plating, and the W gives a lot of armor and magic resist and reduces the attack damage and just like little chip damage by a lot. So minions in particular do a lot less damage to her when she grabs minion aggro in the lane. But then even just like auto attacks, Scorch, Airy, Electrocute, Dark Harvest, you know, all of these little runes and little items that add in damage just do a lot less to her because of that W's flat damage reduction. And she can engage anytime, anywhere, right? So she can go through minion waves with her E, so she's always a threat. There's nowhere to hide. She just creates a huge presence in the laning phase and is very difficult to work around, especially if she gets ahead. She can almost always force action. And it's just that low cooldown that I mentioned. Her ult's only 90 seconds, which is absurd. Nautilus is like 120. Most other engaged champions, I think Rakan's 130. So most other engaged champions have at least 120 seconds. But for some reason, she gets basically a built-in free, like, 25%, you know, CDR on her ult starting at 90. So it's just way too strong. Really good range on it. Then her Q, that point click, basically auto attack stun, is only on a 5-second cooldown. So it's 5 seconds for your 1.25 second stun. Your E, when you max that out second, can go down to, I think, like 6 seconds or something. So she's just super sticky, right? And once you start getting CDR, it's going to be like 4 seconds for stun. So she can just keep you locked up forever. And she has just tons and tons of opportunities to make plays with her ult. So and it's very tanky and puts out decent damage with her sunlight procs too. So she's just a pest. It's really hard to peel her. And she can just completely steamroll. Now, I don't play her as much on stream because she is risky, right? You can get baited. If you do go in with your E, you have no escapes whatsoever, and you have to go all the way in. So you can't just kind of meet halfway like Nautilus. You don't pull them to you like with Blitzcrank. You go all the way over to them. So it does make you vulnerable to engages. And if you do get caught out of position, then you are probably going to die because you have no way of dashing or speeding up or really slowing down the enemy. So you do have to be very careful with the positioning. But overall, I think that she is quite strong. Now, Janna's another one who's been doing very well. And, low-key, she's been one of the best enchanters for a while now. Historically, she is the best enchanter. I think just overall, she has the highest win rate from Season 1 to now in solo queue, at least for low diamond and lower of all time. And there's just a lot that goes into her and why she's strong. She just has fantastic peel with her tornado and her ult. So she is actually a pretty safe enchanter. And most enchanters don't have that. They just kind of fold to, a Talon jumping over a wall. It's like, well, I'm dead, right? But Janna actually has tools to deal with that potentially. Now, in exchange for that, her laning phase can potentially be a little rougher into other enchanters because she doesn't have a heal and her shield's on a very low cooldown early on. Her W spam can be pretty strong, especially with Aerie or Comet. So if you're against other melee champs, she can be very good. But she can kind of struggle a little bit versus Sona and things like that in fights. But it's really kind of in the mid to late game where she shines. Her shield ends up giving whoever you shield an extra BF sword and some change. So it's 40 base AD plus, I think it's 10% of your AP. So huge amount of stats, like over 1,500 gold worth of stats, 1,500 to 2,000 gold worth of stats. And then her ultimate not only blows everybody back and completely just negates most forms of engage, but it also heals everyone for 800 or something health. Just crazy numbers on that. And she's just so fast with her W. So if you do get caught out of position, if someone does, intercept you in the river or something, you can probably get away because you're going to be fast with your W. You can throw your tornado over your back, which does not have a cast animation, by the way. She can do it while she's running. Which a lot of people don't realize that about her, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of her spells don't have animations and she can do them while she's running. So that does add up in terms of her positioning. And she can play very far back in fights too. Her shield has 800 range versus someone like Lulu has 650. Sona really has to operate within 500 range to make good use of her auras. So a lot of other champs just have to be a lot closer and put themselves in more danger than Janna does, but she can rotate really quickly. She can get good vision because she is relatively safe. She is fast. She works very well around split pushers, so she can rotate and help out split pushers or intercept them, or you can stop the enemy from engaging on your team. So if you have a Fiora in a side lanes putting pressure on a tower and the enemy decides they have a Mumu or something and they just decide, hey, we can't beat that Fiora, so we're just going to try to hard engage on the other 4 people, Janna makes that very, very difficult because she's one of the best disengages in the game. And she has gotten Mandate, which is very good on her because her W is a low cooldown and you can trigger Mandate often. Also, your ultimate blowing everybody back does do the Mandate damage. Your ult doesn't do flat damage, but it does displace, which is enough to trigger Mandate. So she's very, very good with Mandate as well. However, there might be some matchups where you could go the new Moonstone if it is going to be longer. In terms of fights, it does have a much lower win rate right now because it was complete garbage before this buff, like I said it was going to be in my items preview. But now that it has much stronger stats, it's possible that Moonstone could be good if you have like a double tank team. If the fights are going to go on for a long time, it might be better than Mandate. So it's tough to say. She might just go Mandate anyways. It kind of depends on how the game's going, but Moonstone might be on the table. She's not going to be the biggest abuser of it just because she already uses Mandate well, but it is going to be another option, and ultimately, if it becomes another option, then more versatility will be a good thing for her. So yeah, I think Janna's going to be solid. By the way, you can click on these little mini Google Docs. I'll have a link to this in the description, and it just tells you recommended runes, recommended items, and then moves on from there. Oh, I need to upgrade him real quick. I've gone back to the Rakan, Guardian, Font. This one's kind of situational, but I'll just put Bone Plating, so it depends on what's going on. Revitalize, and then Ghost Poro, and Ulti Hunter. I will say something really quick about this because people ask questions often about Font, and the reason that you take Font is because of its interaction with Staff of Flowing Water and Ardent Censer. And a lot of people don't realize or respect just how powerful that is. So you might look at something like Shield Bash and say, okay, well, Rakan gets the shield as part of his passive, so this is good. That means he's going to get an extra 3 armor and magic resist and maybe do 10 extra damage when he goes in for a trade. That's good, right? It's like, it looks good, but it just doesn't scale as well as Font does if you're going for the Staff of Flowing Water or the Ardent Censer as your second or third item, which most of the time you should be doing that as Rakan. So when you look at the stats on this item, it's going to look like it's terrible, right? It's going to be like, okay, I healed for like 300 or 400 this game off of Font, which is really unimpressive. But that's not the reason you take it. The reason you take it is because whenever you slow or immobilize a champion, it marks them for 4 seconds. Anyone that auto-attacks that person gets healed, and that heal counts as a heal from you. So the way it's worded, it makes it seem like they just get a heal, like it's a lifesteal, like they're generating that heal. But that's not how it works. It's a heal that comes from you. So that means that it triggers Ardent Censer and it triggers Staff of Water. Why is that important? Well, whenever you engage with Rakan and you knock somebody up with a W, it's going to mark them. And then anyone on your team that auto-attacks that person that you just engaged on, so theoretically everyone on your team can hit them, it's going to put the Staff of Flowing Water or the Ardent Censer buff or both on everybody. It puts it on your entire team. So it just adds a lot of consistency in how you're spreading that buff throughout your whole team. And Staff of Flowing Water, the buff is worth about 1,000 gold in the mid game. So you're effectively giving each person that gets that buff an extra 1,000 gold in a fight. If you don't have Font, then you have to manually shield them or like hit a Q and then heal them with your Q in order to get that effect, right? And so, a traditional Rakan trading might be you shield in, you shield your tank or something, you W to knock them up, and then you shield back out to somebody else, potentially. So you could put it on 3 people, but the other 2 people aren't going to be able to get it. So with this, you could, in that type of scenario, if you had Font, you could potentially give it to 2 more people, which is 2,000 extra gold in value. So it doesn't look like it's that much, but when you start thinking of that, you're like, dang, I could have given out 2,000 more gold in value in that team fight. It's an astronomical value proposition, right? If you look at even some of the, highest scaling runes like Gathering Storm, you're still not going to get that value for a lot of the time on Gathering Storm. So it's very, very underrated, and it's very powerful on anybody that's going to get Staff of Flowing Water and Ardent Censer. So just keep that in mind, that you're getting it for that. You're not getting it for the dinky 300 or 400 heal. You're getting it for the thousands of gold in extra value that you unlock. And Ghost Poro is the other one that I'll mention that a lot of people really don't focus on enough. Ghost Poro, first of all, it extends the timer on your wards in the early game by 60 seconds, which is huge. That allows you to watch dragons better, allows you to keep an eye on raptors or whatever else you're trying to ward. Vision is power, and power is good. But it stacks a lot faster than people think it does, because when your ward dies, then it creates a Poro, which is 1 stack, and then if that Poro spots somebody, it gives another stack. So if you have this in a bush in their jungle, and then the jungler, walks by and it sees them, then it's going to give 2 stacks. Whenever you get to 10 stacks, then you get 30 ability power, and that's really the key prize. It's over a 600 gold rune whenever you do that, which is a huge value proposition. So you get extra vision, and you also get over 600 gold on a secondary rune, which is huge. So it helps you early game, it helps you late game. It's just a fantastic all-around rune, because once you get your ward item, you're able to get guaranteed 3 stacks, every 2.5 minutes when you place your wards. And then you might even get up to 6 stacks in 3 minutes if those Poros see somebody. The only way that they can stop this and slow you down is if they're clearing all of your wards. But especially at low diamond and lower, they're not going to clear all your wards, especially if you're placing like good quality wards in places that are unlikely to get swept, like right on top of the raptor pit where it's not going to get pinked by the raptor bush and it's not going to get pinked by the bush near the entrance. There's a certain place you can put it. Watch my video, my vision video. But yeah, unless they're sweeping all of your wards constantly, which is not going to happen until like master and challenger level, Ghost Poro is going to be super strong. The competing one, Zombie Ward, is sort of the inverse. It's really bad in lower brackets because a lot of people just may not ward, and so you may not even get to zombie enough wards. You have to clear 10 wards in order to get the zombie to trigger. And a lot of times it creates redundant vision. So a lot of times, you know, the wards that you're going to spot are going to be off of your own control wards. And if you control ward a bush and then sweep it, you get a zombie ward, sure, but it's in the same bush, so it's not offering a lot of extra utility. So usually you're only getting utility off of your sweeper and not off of the control wards with zombie ward. So it's pretty good, but it doesn't do anything in the early game until you get your sweeper, which is, you know, 8 to 10 minutes after you complete your warding item. So it doesn't help you watch early dragons. And it just stacks a lot slower, right? Each Poro, once again, can give you 2 stacks. Zombie Ward is only ever going to give you 1 stack, so it's not terrible. Very good on junglers, but I think for supports, there are better options. And then Eyeball Collection's okay, but it doesn't help your vision out at all. It's just straight up, if you get 10 kills or assists, then you're going to unlock it. So it is good. It just doesn't give you any extra value. So that's why I like Ghost Poro and Font of Life. So those are just 2 runes I figured I'd mention because those are a little different. You know, a lot of the all caps videos and the big corporate guides are not going to tell you about those runes, but I think those are really good. Okay, so talk about Janna. So Sona is going to be the next sort of rising in power, I think. Now we're gonna have to, you know, see how this shakes out, but she's not in a terrible spot right now. And traditionally, Sona almost always has 53 or 54% just because she's so easy to play and she offers so many stats. She has great harassment early on with the Q spam, auto attacks, and Airy, Scorch, all that stuff. But she just didn't have a good Keystone rune or whatever mythic rune because she really can't comfortably use Mandate like she can. She has to use her E in order to mandate people, or like your ult can be used to mandate people, but it requires very specific sequencing and setting up, and it's just really kind of a pain, right? Versus something like Moonstone's going to be a lot better because it just works. You can sequence and, you know, hit them with the green chime instead, which is very good. It's like a mini exhaust, like lowers their damage output by 25 or 30%. So most of the time in most fights, you want to be hitting people with the green. So it allows you to do that a little bit more and just operate more freely and just have more opportunities. So the fact that she slows down fights naturally because she already puts out a ton of healing, a ton of shielding, then Moonstone Renewer just kind of doubles down on that and allows you to extend the fights even further, and that's exactly what Sona wants. You know, if a fight lasts longer than, 5 seconds, if she gets off 2 rounds of her spells, then you're probably going to win just because those auras are so strong already. So she's the type of champ that should be doing very well in a tank meta. She just wasn't because Moonstone was a pile of garbage, right? But now it's a lot better, so I think she's looking to move up quite a bit. She's one of the greatest abusers of Staff of Flowing Water and of Ardent Censer. So I think that she will move up. Now the big question is, can you survive? Can you live with Sona? So I highly recommend that you take something like Barrier on her. I know this controversial. People are doing this on Soraka a lot. But the main reason is, you need to personally survive. That's the most important thing in team fights. If you personally live, you can help other people live, right? With your green shot, with your healing, with your shielding. So if you can just remove that squishiness from the equation, if you can take Guardian and if you can take Barrier, it's going to be a lot harder for Assassins to pick you off. And if you can take a defensive boot like Ninja Tabby or Mercury Treads if necessary, if you can adapt, it can be very good. And as a second or third item, now you can even get Banshee's Veil or Zanya's if you need to. You don't want to do that. You want to just get the Moonstone plus double aura items, right, with Ardent Censer plus Staff of Flowing Water. But if you need to, it's on the table. So, especially if they don't have double Assassin, if they have a lot of tanks on their team and you have a lot of tanks on your team, I think that Sona can be fantastic. She outscales almost every other support in the game at 3 items. She's just going to blow people away. So as long as you can stay safe on that back line, and just really leverage those auras, then I think she's gonna be really, really strong right now. And she just synergizes so well with those items because she loves all of the mana regen, right? She's a huge mana hog. So Moonstone has 100%, Ardent has 100%, and Staff has 100%. And you don't really care about the CDR as much, right? So like Staff of Flowing Water and Ardent Censer don't have ability haste, as it's called now, on it, which is a real pain in the butt for long cooldown champions like Rakan from time to time. But on Sona, all of her, auras are going to be like 4 seconds once you get to level 11 because you get free CDR on them off of your ultimate. And they're just really low base cooldown in general. She just spams spells. The only thing that really is affected significantly by ability haste is her ult. So I think that she's really well positioned with these types of items if she can just survive. And I think with all the tanks, with the nerfs to Harvester, the nerfs to Fizz, Echo, Diana, all of that stuff, I think fights are going to go longer. And she's going to be the queen of really long team fights. So that's why I moved her up significantly on this patch. Because it's a meta shift, and Moonstone, I believe, is going to be a lot better. I don't know it's going to be, like I said, necessarily like 100% OP, just because there's so much Grievous Wounds out there, but I do expect it to go up, 2% at least on most champions as far as win rates go. And Zyra is the final tier 1 champion that I'll mention here. I think she's still going to be strong. Yes, she did lose Night Harvester, if that's what you wanted to go, but that was already a minority item. Not many people went for that item. Most people were going Leandri's, and Leandri's just got barely tapped. Night Harvester was low-key the stronger one. It's 3% higher than Leandri's. So if you listen to me, you probably want a lot more games on Zyra this patch. So this is okay. So it does lose like 5% damage, but she can still bully people in lane. Once you complete Leandri's and you get the Sorcerer Boots, you are going to put out some really big numbers in terms of damage. But if you look at the Azakana Mask, yes, it was good when you complete it. But there are some other good options too, right? Like Void Staff is not that much further behind, right? It's 58% win rate instead of 60, and it has a much friendlier build path that I mentioned before. So I think that's okay. And then you can get something like a Nomicon as your third item if you want to help your team out with some Grievous Wounds. So she still has good options. Great harassment in the laning phase. And I just like her because she's very consistent, right? Even if you miss your skill shot, like your Q or your E, half the time when you spawn the plant, it's still going to do some damage to them. So it's very, very difficult to cast spells and not do damage as Zyra. You almost can't miss. It's almost like you're trying to... I don't know, you're shooting a shotgun to try to hit something that's like 5 feet in front of you. You're going to hit it. It may not be the perfect or the cleanest hit, but, it's going to, leave a mark, right? So, anyway, I think that makes her good. And she can also control vision very well. So you can spawn those plants and bushes. They are not shut out by control wards. So it can give you full vision of an area, and it can allow you to contest those control wards and move your vision up into more aggressive positions than a lot of other AP mages can do. So I think that makes her the queen of bushes. And yeah, if you can get vision and get control of an area, she's extremely powerful. She does a ton of damage. If you just full rotation somebody, E plant, Q plant, ult, ignite, then that's going to delete a ton of people out there. Now, there are still a bunch of tanks, so keep that in mind. There's, fewer people to delete now than there was in the past, but she still has okay game against tanks because of the consistent damage you put out with the plants, with the Leandri's. So that's good. Now, I will say that I do prefer Comet. I know more people are I guess more people aren't building it, but some people are doing Electrocute instead of Comet. I personally think Comet's a lot better just because, like, a typical, safer trading pattern in the laning phase is to just Q plant. If you walk up for the auto, you can do that, but you're opening yourself up to getting engaged on or getting blown up. So there are circumstances where you can land those autos as well, which would trigger Electrocute, but sometimes you just can't, and it can bait you into trying to walk up and get that auto when it's not safe to do so, versus Comet's just going to give you that value regardless. And you can trigger Comet multiple times in team fights. Like Electrocute, you're only going to trigger once, but all of these plants, each time the plants hit people, I think they are coded as area of effect. So each time they hit people, they're reducing the cooldown on Comet by 10%. So in the mid game, it might start off at 12%. And then, if all of these plants are hitting different people in combat, you might get it reduced by 50%. So you might get it down to 6 seconds. So that's not uncommon. And you could easily get off like 3 comets in a team fight in the same amount of time it would take you to do an electrocute. And comet can hit multiple people too. Electrocute's always just going to hit one person, versus comet, if people are stacked up together, can potentially hit multiple people. So I just prefer comet a little bit more. It does also give you access to Scorch, which does add up quite a bit in the early game. Absolute Focus is a bit more damage, and then Mana Flow is honestly kind of worthless if you're going Leandries. This was very good if you're going Night Harvester, just to give you a little bit of mana regen early, but frankly, it's not that great. So I guess the secondaries are a little bit better with Electrocute, because things like Taste of Blood can help keep you topped off, and I already talked about Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter. Those are the 2 secondaries that I get, by the way. When I take Comet, then I like to get Ghost Poro and Ulti Hunter with her as well. So there's some wiggle room. I just personally like Comet. I've had more success on that, but Electrocute can be pretty good too. Dark Harvest is okay. It's a good scaling rune if you really start going off, but I just don't think it does enough in the early game. But anyways, we'll move on. Make sure we cover some more people. Now, Bard is someone else that it's just kind of been weird. I've tried him. He feels a little clumsy, like, because he doesn't have a great rune, or a great item. Yeah, he can get Imperial Mandate, and that does work with his auto attacks. So it's okay, but I don't think it's nearly as good as Athene's was for him in the early game. And he's not that great against tanks, honestly, because, the big part of his kit is hitting someone with an R and then hard engaging. But if you hit a tank, with the R, they're not going to care if you hard engage. Or if you hit their, squishy champion with this R and then the tank steps in front, it's going to be very difficult to get around them. So heavy roaming is also not as effective as it was. It's okay, but being able to stay in lane and just try to hard dominate and get your Jen ahead or get your Samira ahead is pretty important right now. So it's Athene's got removed. That was his best item. I think that Deadman's got nerfed pretty significantly. It's only got 40 armor on it instead of 80. Yes, it does have some extra movement speed, but I don't think that's worth losing the 40 armor. So that's a little bit weaker than it was. Shirelia's got basically removed. So his top 3 items, Athene's, Shirelia's, and Deadman's, all got either nerfed or just flat out removed from the game. So I just haven't been feeling that great about him playing him, but maybe I'll have to give him another shot. There are some circumstances where he is very good. If you do need that really long range engage, he is good for that. And certain matchups like against a Karthus or things like that where you're going to get a lot of value out of your ultimate, and using it defensively can be pretty strong. So he's okay. I just think we're kind of entering into a scaling meta with much longer fights, and that's just not the kind of thing that he's really good at. He's just going to get blown out by a Janna or a Sona or something like that later on in the game if he doesn't pick them off immediately with his ult, which you can do, but I don't know. But I still have him on here just because he is still very versatile. He can find a way. He does have great roaming. He has, fantastic engage if you can make good use of it. It's not like he can't use those items. Mandate's pretty good on him. If you do take Font of Life, then your auto attacks do apply as slow, and that would allow you to use the Staff of Flowing Water. It's just going to make you squishier. So I just don't think that he uses Staff and Ardent as well as some of the other options out there, but he can use them if he wants to. So he's still pretty good. Yuumi is going to be one of the really big winners here. Now, I don't expect Yuumi to go positive. I think she'll still have a negative win rate, but she is really, really difficult to deal with if she gets ahead, particularly on tanks, because if they're tanky, if your teammates are tanky, that means you're also tanky. So it's going to be really difficult to kill her. Now that Moonstone, she's going to be one of the biggest Moonstone beneficiaries right there with Sona, I think, because it just always works. And you can actually trigger it just by hitting people with a long-range Q or whatever. You can trigger it. And they said that they fixed a bug on this. I don't know if... here it says it. Heal now properly triggers if you're out of combat and cast an ability on an ally who's in combat. So they changed this. It's a huge change. So now if they hit your ally and you heal them, even if you didn't hit the enemy, you're still counted as in combat, I suppose, and it still triggers Moonstone. So if you are able to, heal some, so like you're attached to your AD carry and they get hit by something and you heal them, it triggers Moonstone. Versus before, it sounds like you would have to hit the enemy with your Q in order to trigger it, right? So I think if I'm reading that correctly, I'm going to have to test it out, but I think that's a very, very big deal for healers, that normally you would not be tagged as in combat if you heal somebody unless you have taken or received damage personally. You would not count as in combat, but now it does count it, because it now properly triggers if you're out of combat and cast an ability on an ally who's in combat. So that's going to make it much, much easier to trigger Moonstone. And then once you're in combat, I believe, as long as your ally stays in combat, then Moonstone's going to keep triggering. So I think this is fantastic. Fits perfectly with her style. Yeah, she can use Mandate. If she hits her Q, it does trigger it, but your Q's on kind of a long cooldown. So I think that Moonstone just fits her style better. And she can very comfortably go Ardent plus Staff of Flowing Water, because you don't have to worry about being squishy because you're attached. And she gives out a lot of extra attack speed and movement speed off of her heal. So it's just perfect. And all of these things give her mana regen. Each one of these gives her 100% mana regen. So I think this is just a perfect match for her. So I'm not sure if you would go Airy here. You might go Airy. Airy Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm or something like that. Or maybe even Guardian. I think Guardian triggers if you're attached and the person takes a lot of damage. That would give you access to Revitalize and Font, which once again, Font with the Q, you're applying a slow, your whole team is going to get to benefit from this stuff, not just the person you're attached to. So I think that might be really underrated on her. How many people go Guardians? 46% on Guardian versus 48% on Airy. So I don't know. I'll have to test it out and see, but I think there definitely will be a way that Yuumi will potentially get to 49 or 50% and be very, very strong in this meta. Okay, and then Taric's the other one that I bumped up quite a bit. So he went from like completely off the list, and I put him up on tier 2. And I think a lot of it is just kind of a meta call right now, to where he is very good against hard engage. Because that's the thing, is like these champs against Leona, if she gets a hold of them, like if she gets a hold of Sona, she's dead, right? There's not a lot Sona can do. If she gets a hold of the person that Yuumi's attached to, if they're not a tank, then that could be a big problem as well. But Taric personally is really tanky, and he provides a lot of protection to his allies against assassins, and he's going to thrive in really long team fights.
Can you give me to my potty?
Okay. All right, give me just 1 second. I'm just going to put her on the bathroom real quick. Sorry, I'm recording this during the day. Okay, let's go. All right, sorry about that. But yeah, so he is personally resilient against someone like a Leona. It's very, very difficult to engage into Taric because he can stun your AD carry, stun him back. He personally has really high base stats, and he has a shield for both he and his ally, and he has like this spammable heal for he and his ally. So I think that makes him uniquely strong in a lot of circumstances. And in like really long team fights, once again, as long as you have everyone bunched up and you have enough time, that 2.5 seconds to get the ultimate on, a ton of people on your team, he's very, very strong, right? Just the only reason that Taric sometimes doesn't get played, there's a couple of reasons why he hasn't in the past. Number one, he's not very good at roaming. He's somewhat slow. He does have 340 base movement speed, which is good, but he doesn't have anything else that like speeds him up. And sometimes against assassins and things like that, if there's too much damage, then his ultimate, the person will die before the ultimate goes off. And he doesn't have great engage. So if everyone on your team are playing like these skirmishers and assassins and things like that, it can be kind of hard just to even start a team fight. But if there are multiple people on your team playing engaged champions, so if you have like a Malphite on your team or an Amumu, who are both extremely popular right now, or Nunu, like if you have other people that can engage and you don't have to, then that's going to make you very, very strong in 5v5 team fights. And I think that's where we are right now in this meta. I expect to see Amumu, Malphite, Ornn, just all these tanks everywhere. Because those are just like the highest win rate champions right now, and they didn't really nerf them. They touched Sunfire in a hotfix, but it's still not enough. He's still going to be very, very strong. So he's just got spammable spells. If you can stay in combat and auto attack people if they don't kite you, so he loves to just sit there and just chip away at tanks, just beat on them, and just keep lowering his cooldowns and spamming his abilities. So he has spammable stun, spammable heal, W, and a couple of things about the items are good with him. So I don't think Locket's that great on him personally, at least in theory, because he's not designed to stop. I mean, I guess stopping burst is okay because that does give you time for your ult to go off, but he wants these longer fights, right? Like he wants to sit there and have these 10 to 15 second fights, and Locket's just not going to give you a ton of value in that. Moonstone, however, will give you a ton of value in those situations. As long as you can keep people up, you're going to keep that heal cranking out, and he's going to be very strong with that. He does have a decent AP ratio on his Q. It's not amazing, but it's okay. And now this gives him a lot of stuff that he wants. He has the mana regen on it, which is huge. Locket has no mana regen. He's a big mana hog, so that's good. And then the ability haste in general is just phenomenal on him because that means your ult's going to be up longer. Now, I don't know how the ability haste works off of his passive, because it used to be whenever you had a certain amount of CDR, it would, like, you had diminishing returns on your CDR. It was really weird. Like your auto attacks, instead of reducing it by 1 second, would start to get fractional with how much they were reducing it. So CDR didn't used to scale on him too well. I still don't know that it's amazing, but it's at least like pretty good on his ult. So I just think this matches like his ideal sort of win condition in team fights. And then Zeke's was also reworked to be much, much better on him because now you don't have to use your ult to trigger it. So you don't have to feel compelled to use your ult at funky times just to get the extra value out of Zeke's for the extra damage. All you have to do is stun him. And if you stun him and you just keep auto-attacking and weaving in your spells, you know, auto-auto-Q, auto-auto-Q, auto-auto-E, auto-auto-Q, you know, the Taric trading pattern, then, you know, you can have this up a lot, almost permanently up. Because I would say, like, you're going to be able to stun somebody every 4 seconds if you just continually weave your spells in combat and you're landing those auto attacks. It's going to be, you know, a stun every 4 to 6 seconds at least. So this is a lot of damage that could be put up. And it has raw health on it now, which it didn't used to have health, which scales with a lot of his different abilities. That's the best stat on him. And then it still has the armor, and it has the flat mana, which helps him out with his mana problems. So I think that Moonstone into Zeke's is a fantastic 1-2 combo that he just didn't have access to in the past. And then after that, it's kind of up in the air. I think that, you know, something like Knight's Vow is kind of a bad item, but could be okay. Redemption is also quite good, though, because you do get the 20% healing and shielding, the mana regen, and you get that nice little burst of healing at the end. In theory, he can also do stuff like Staff of Flowing Water if you want to do that second or third. Can be pretty phenomenal on him as well. Now, his AP scaling is, remember, okay, not phenomenal, and that is going to make you squishy, but overall, he does have some good options. But I do think that, like I said, the Renewer into Zeke's can be a great 1-2 combo if you're looking for an Enchanter-style champion that puts out a lot of healing, that's great in team fights, but also has some really good game against stuff like Leona. I think that Taric could be a good counter pick as long as you have that Malphite on your team or just something else that can start fights comfortably, and you're confident that they're going to pull the trigger. Brand is another one that's good. I just think of Brand as kind of Zyra light. He doesn't have the same level of consistency on his damage that Zyra has, because if you just miss your W, you get no value out of it, right? Versus Zyra's plants, you're still going to get good value. Zyra's plants and just all of her abilities go through minions as well, so there's really nowhere to hide. Kind of like with Leona, you can just kind of take your shot whenever you want and still hide behind the minions to be safe. Versus Brand, like his major combo requires you to hit a Q on somebody, which requires a straight line, so you have to open yourself up, hit the skill shot, and make sure that you're not getting hit by the hooks or the engages or anything like that. So I think that that can be it's okay against like heavy melee comps. He can be good, but you know, a lot of the tanks are going to shrug off his damage over time. They did nerf the mask on him, which I think he needs that mask a little bit more than Zyra does. You see the differential here is actually quite large. It's only 52 win rate on Void Staff on him versus Demonic Embrace was 59%. So that's a 7% differential versus on Zyra it was only like a 2% differential. So anyways, he's okay. I just think if you want to play Brand, just play Zyra. Zyra is a bit harder to play. She's a bit more weird, but I think overall she's going to be a lot stronger. Brand does have a better like oh crap button. Like if you're about to get blown up and you just want to like press R and do damage in a fight, he does have that going for him. But by and large, I just think that Zyra is going to be a better option. And the final one in tier 2 that I have here, and we'll kind of speed up a little bit through the rest of this, is going to be Swain. I still think he's pretty good. He's underrated. His win rate is not crazy right now. It's like 52%, but he has a very good sort of all-in trading in the laning phase with that E. You can grab people, pull them out of position, and then get that electrocute proc really easily. He was a great user of the Leandries into Demonic Embrace. Once again, that has been nerfed, so you know, he can do Hourglass second, though, which is not that bad. It's, you know, only a couple of points under Demonic Embrace. So he still has some pretty solid options. And that's probably all you're going to be able to get in most games is going to be like Leandries and Zanyas, unless you're like really fed. But you can still just get the Morellonomicon after that if you want to. You know, or you could get Void Staff. But I think probably just Morello is going to be your best bet. So yeah, good grab early, nice piece of all-in CC, like pretty high chance that you're going to hit that. It's very difficult to dodge if you're using that correctly early on. And then he has some nice sustain, so he's kind of like a burst mage that's also tanky. So he's going to have some pretty good game against assassins, sort of Taric-esque. You know, if you're looking, you know, Taric was if you're looking for an enchanter but you want to be resilient against all in. Swain's kind of like if you're looking for an AP champion but you want to be somewhat resilient to all in, then Swain's a decent option there. So pretty good. Has nice scouting too with his eye. You know, this is going to allow you to check bushes a little bit better. So I think overall he's solid. There are probably better choices out there overall, but he is very unique, and he does bring some interesting stuff to the table in terms of early game pressure in the lane for an AP champ that's also kind of a tank hybrid. And then rounding out the charts here, Blitzcrank is still going to, you know, he is what he is. And I had someone on stream ask me, well, why is Blitzcrank not stronger right now or more popular? And it's just the tanks. You know, he's if you grab tanks, it's not good. Right, so Leona is very popular. I think she's either the most popular or the second most popular support right now. So if you have a bad matchup into Leona, it's rough. And yes, like someone like Sona potentially can have a bad matchup into her in the laning phase, but Blitzcrank's going to have a bad matchup pretty much all game. So yes, you can hit the hook of destiny, but completely turn a game around, but there's a lot more counterplay to him out there as well. There's a lot of mobile champions. There's so many champions are running Eclipse out there for the extra movement speed, or they just have a lot of dashes. And then there's so many more options for like Banshee's Veil or for Edge of Night to give you that bubble to protect you. So there's just less valid targets running around. Usually each team's going to have 1 or 2 tanks, sometimes even up to 3 if you have a support tank, jungle tank, and top tank. And it's just really hard to burst people out. There's a lot of ways to prevent burst out there. So he's okay, but I think there's just, if you want the hard engage, I would just go with Leona. It's just much more consistent and just more sustained CC that you can do in fights that's still going to give you some value. Even if you don't blow someone up immediately with your ult catch, you can still, maneuver about in fights and have a huge impact. Versus Blitz, it's like after he hooks, he's pretty much worthless, right, for another like 12 seconds. So anyways, I prefer that. Soraka is another one that I'll mention here. Now, the Moonstone buff is going to be very, very important for Soraka, but the problem is she's so over-indexed on healing that Grievous Wounds is absolutely devastating against her, especially the 60% upgraded Grievous Wounds on things like Morellonomicon. Just absolutely crushes her because she has no shields in her kit. So she's very vulnerable to those types of things. And yes, she is good with tanks. yes, Moonstone is going to be amazing on her. Especially now, I think her ult would trigger Moonstone on someone across the map. Not 100%, but it says that if you heal somebody who's in combat, it triggers Moonstone. So, not 100% how that interaction is going to work, because it doesn't say you have to target him. But, I mean, she does have good items, right? You've got Moonstone into Redemption, into something like Staff of Flowing Water. Like, all that's very good, but you're very squishy. You're very vulnerable to Assassins, to Leona, any sort of hard engage, and just Grievous Wounds completely wrecks you later on. So, she's okay, but I would rather... I'd probably rather play Sona. You just have more guaranteed poke early, and your W puts out a hybrid of shield and healing. And you have other stuff you can do, like your W reduces the damage on somebody by 25 to 30% in the early to mid game. You have the Wombo combo with the ultimate. So I feel like Sona's in a little bit of a better spot right now. And even someone like Yuumi, just because you can attach later on, and it's very difficult to pick you off later on in games. So anyway, she can be okay. Last couple here. Nautilus, I think, is still okay. He is hard engaged. He just doesn't put out enough damage to really start to guarantee those kills as much as Leona does. It's on a longer, his ult's on a longer cooldown. It can be blocked by minions. Not his ultimate, his hook can be blocked by minions. You can't go over walls. So it's just a litany of stuff that's problematic about Nautilus in terms of all-in, engage, and access to the backline. So he's all right. It's just, I think that you're just going to get out-sustained. There's going to be lifesteal in the laning phase, whether it's going to be Eclipse on people or Shield Bow or whatever. The AD carries are going to have sustain. A lot of the enchanters are going to have healing and sustain. So I just don't think he's going to have enough juice in the tank to completely blow somebody up with his combo in a lot of circumstances in the early game. And they're just going to sustain back up and take advantage of you when your stuff is on cooldown. So I think he's okay. He's not terrible. It's just Leona's going to be better. But if Leona's nerfed, then, maybe you could take a look at him. But it's not terrible. He's okay. Lulu got some pretty hard nerfs. I'm kind of surprised she's as low as she is when things like Vayne are already pretty strong. But, with this kind of revitalization of AD carries with the new Phantom Dancer buffs and the Tier of the Goddess, the Manamune, massive buffs, then champions that want to go Gensu's, Manamune, Phantom Dancer, could be very strong. So your Kai'Sa's, maybe Vayne. Vayne's not going to go Manamune, but maybe those attack speed champs will be better. But Lulu, huge issue is that she's very short range. They did lower the attack speed buff that she hands out. She doesn't have a lot of scaling with plus healing and shielding. Doesn't have a good keystone. So yeah, she can get Moonstone now, which will help out a little bit. She was okay with Mandate, but not crazy. So she's all right. Maybe specifically with Vayne or Twitch or Kog'Maw, she can still be good, but it's probably better options. And then Nami is one of the last ones that I'll mention here. She's very strong. She does have great trading, point click early on. She's got the bubble for all ends. I just don't think she has as much scaling as some of the other champs, and she's just a bit more vulnerable compared to some of the other enchanters, most notably Janna, when you're just kind of roaming around. So she only has one ability that scales with plus healing and shielding. So she has good CC, and she does have a high win rate right now, but it doesn't quite have as much scaling. Some of the other ones, really quickly, that I didn't have on here that are just kind of that show up sometimes. Alistar is getting played. He does have a decent win rate. He has good engage. He can roam around and make plays. I just feel like he has virtually no scaling compared to, someone like a Rakan. And then I would just prefer Leona. I just think Leona just has more consistent CC and uptime in team fights versus once he does his combo, he's pretty worthless in a lot of fights. I mean, there's a little bit there. So if you can hard roam and make plays with him, I think he can be okay, but he is somewhat problematic. Morgana's a decent counter pick against Leona in general, but I think that, and pretty good against Rakan as well, but I think that she just gets blasted by strong AP champs like Zyra, or even Sona or Janna are still going to be really good into her. And I've had people say, oh, well, she's really good with Night Harvester and things like that. It's yeah, she can proc it with her W, but she just doesn't have enough consistent follow-up damage and ability to proc it on multiple people in the same way that some of the other champs that were abusing Night Harvester could do it. So she's okay. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed it. So get out there, try some of these new champs. If you do like enchanters, give them a whirl. I think Moonstone's going to help. I think that the recognition of the tank meta with more people playing tanks is going to help. They even said on the next patch they might buff the enchanters up. So we'll cross our fingers and hope they lower the cost of these items, like the mythics, down to 2,600 or maybe 2,500. That would be a godsend. Or putting CDR back on Forbidden Idol. But anyways, that's it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.